Good morning. So here we're going to factor by GCF, and we need to get it to factored form if we're going to solve it or solve the polynomial. So these problems here are all written in standard form, and the goal is to find the GCF to rewrite it to factored form. So here are a few examples. Copy those down. If I look at this first example, 5x squared plus 10x, what do they have in common? 5x squared plus 10x. The 5 and 10 have a GCF of 5. And then they both have an x in common. This one has 2 x's and he has 1. So if I were to think about circling a pair that they have in common, they have 1 x in common. So 5x is its GCF. So if I look next to the factored form, there we go. So factored form for this polynomial would be 5x on the outside of the parentheses, and it's almost like we want to undistribute. Oh, I should do this. Undistribute the 5x from those two terms. So 5x times what would give me 5x squared? Well, I need an x. 5x times what gives me a plus 10x, plus 2. Then we look at the second one. Now it's in factored form. Then the second one, 30a squared minus 40a. So let's look at the numbers first. Your 30 and 40 are coefficients. Their GCF for 30 and 40 is 10. 10 is the largest number that goes into both 30 and 40. And then we look at their letters. He has 2 A's, he has 1. He has 1 in common, or they have a pair. I can circle 1 match. 10A is the GCF. So I put 10A in the front of my parentheses, and then 10A times what gives me 30A squared? 3A. If I multiply those two, I would get 30A squared minus 4, because if I multiply negative 4 and 10A, I would get negative 40A. Number 3, x squared minus 7x. They don't have any coefficients in common because they have a 1 and a 7, but they do have an x, only an x in common. So the x goes on the outside of your parentheses. It's like you factor the x out to get x minus 7. So think about that. If I distribute the x to those two terms, I get x squared minus 7x. Factored form, standard form. And then the last term, or polynomial. I have a coefficient of a 1 and 5, so they don't have anything in common. I'm going to expand this out so maybe you'll see it a little bit better. So, he has an x and an x. So they have 1 x in common. Let's zoom in for you. 1 x in common. And then they only have 1 y in common. So the xy is their GCF. Ooh. So xy is going to go on the outside of the parentheses, and then we're going to undistribute that from those two original terms. So you want to think xy times what gives me x squared, almost like gave me x squared y to the 4th. What do I have to multiply this by to get x squared y to the 4th? It's almost like those fill in the blank problems you were doing. So I need another x, and then I need 3 more y's. And then xy times a 5 is what gives us 5xy. So this is in factored form. You know you did it right if nothing inside of the parentheses have anything in common. So I only have a 5 and xy to the 3rd. Nothing's in common. You did it okay. Same thing about here. Inside the parentheses, they should have nothing in common. So just make sure your notebook page looks like mine. And then you can continue on the Desmos.